Welcome to part 2 of 5 for the series on the SOC Automation Project. If you haven't seen part 1, where we go over on how to build a diagram for this lab, I highly recommend you go and watch that. Today, our objective is to install our applications and virtual machines. By the end of the video, you should have one Windows 10 machine with Sysmon installed, one Wazuh server, and one TheHive server. As a quick side note, if you are running a M1, M2, or an M3 Mac, you can still perform this lab, but you will have to create the Windows host in the cloud, rather than setting up a virtual machine on your host. Now, for those that don't know what Wazuh is, on their site will provide a very high-level overview. Wazuh is an open source cybersecurity platform and integrates SIEM and XDR capabilities in a unique solution. They provide multiple capabilities such as security analytics, intrusion detection, incident response, and many more. They have 3 main components that build up Wazuh, which is the indexer, server, and dashboard. As for TheHive, this is a 4-in-1 open source security incident response platform, and we will use this as our case management system. As for our virtual machine, we will be using Windows 10 as our client PC, and I'll use Ubuntu 22.04 for both Wazuh and TheHive. Again, both Wazuh and TheHive will be spun up in the cloud. However, I will be using a virtual machine to set up my Windows 10 client hosted on my ESXi server, but you can always use VirtualBox or the cloud. And if you aren't too sure on how to install VirtualBox and Sysmon to get set up with Windows 10, I'll start replaying a previous video that I have done in the past to show you. Otherwise, feel free to skip ahead. Alright, so first we'll begin with installing VirtualBox by heading over to their site, virtualbox.org. Now, depending on the operating system you have, that is the one that we're going to be downloading. So we can go ahead and click download VirtualBox 7.0. From here, we know that this machine that I'm using is a Windows host machine. So I'll go ahead and click download on that. While that's downloading, we can actually go ahead and check out the SHA-256 checksums as well. When you go into the checksums, it will provide you with a list of SHA-256 hashes, and then this way, we can verify the downloaded file to determine whether or not it has been altered. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll head over to the downloads directory in which our file lives in. We'll open PowerShell. And then I'll do a get file hash, VirtualBox, hit tab, click on enter. And by default, SHA-256 is generated. What we can do is double click that. And then we can paste it in and see if it matches up. So we know for a fact that the file in transit was not changed whatsoever. Now we can go ahead and double click VirtualBox to start installing it. Now we might get hit with a compatibility issue or missing some software dependencies, but we'll deal with that when the time comes. Click on yes. And from here, we notice that there is a Microsoft Visual C++ 2019 package dependency. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and install this dependency, and I'll put the link down in the description below just in case that you get hit with this dependency as well. I went and downloaded the dependency and installed it. So now we can go ahead and double click the VirtualBox installer again, hit yes. And now it doesn't give me that dependency error anymore. We are presented with some of the features which we can install, and they are all set to be installed by default, but you do have that option to customize it, which is quite nice. Here you can change where you want VirtualBox to be installed in. For example, if you don't have enough space in the C drive, you can always install it in a different drive if you like. But in this case, we'll go with the default and hit next. This will provide you with a warning that it will reset your network connection and temporarily disconnect you. Hit yes and install the needed dependencies. Once it's done installing, you should see this sign. All you got to do is click on finish, and then VirtualBox should automatically pop up. And just like that. We'll navigate to the link which I'll list down in the description for you. And once we're on this page, we can go ahead and scroll down and click on Download Tool Now. This will download what is called a media creation tool, which will help you generate a Windows ISO image file. So we can go ahead and double click that to open the file, click on yes. And now it will get a few things ready. You'll eventually be presented with this license agreements page, and we can go ahead and hit accept. It will say getting a few things ready again. Once it is done checking things, you should be presented with this screen now displaying two options. 1, to upgrade your PC, or 2, create an installation media. What we want to select is create the installation media and hit next. You have the option to customize your settings such as language, edition, and architecture, but I'll leave mine checked to use the recommended option for this PC and hit next. Now we are presented with two media choices to use, a USB flash drive or an ISO file. We'll select the ISO file and hit next and save the ISO file anywhere you like, and it will start downloading. So now that my Windows ISO image has been successfully downloaded, we can now jump over to our VirtualBox and start creating a virtual machine. We'll open up the window for VirtualBox and click on New. Here we can enter a name for our virtual machine and select the directory where we want to store our files. So I will go ahead and name our virtual machine Demo. I'll leave the folder as is. As for the ISO image, I will click on this and select the dropdown, click on Other, and now I'll find the ISO image that I just downloaded. It was listed under Documents, and double click the Windows ISO. At the bottom, there's an option where you can check Skip Unintended Installation, which I will do actually. That way I can install the operating system manually. Now you can uncheck this or check this, it's up to you. I'll click on Next. Here we have the options to configure our virtual machine specifications. However, do be aware that this will be relying on your computer's specifications. For this demo, I'll set my base memory for this virtual machine as 4 gigs. And we'll have it as 1 CPU. I'll click on Next. For the virtual hard disk, I'll leave it as 50 gigs and hit Next. Now this will give you a nice summary as to what your settings are for this virtual machine. If you're good to go, click on Finish. And now we can go ahead and start powering it on. To power it on, you just hit this arrow that says Start. Now once it's running, we should be able to start seeing this Windows 10 setup. So we'll go ahead and select Next and hit Install Now. Once you're presented with this Activate Windows screen, go ahead and select I don't have a product key. And as for the option, select Windows 10 Pro. Hit Next, accept the license terms, and here you have the option to upgrade or custom install Windows only. I'm going to select custom install Windows only, hit Next. And then now, Windows 10 should be installing in the background. What we want to do is open up a web browser. Once you're on this site, you want to click on Download Sysmon. Unless you're running Linux, then you can go ahead and click on the link for GitHub. But since I'm on a Windows machine, we'll click on Download Sysmon. And while that's downloading, we should go ahead and start downloading the configuration file that we'll start using for Sysmon. And again, all of this will be in the description down below. Once we're on this page, we want to scroll down to find sysmonconfig.xml. Click on that. Once you're on this page, you want to click on raw. And then it'll load this up. And then all you got to do is right click, click save as. And then you can save it as anything you want. In this case, I'll just type in sysmonconfig and then saves it as that. Now that Sysmon has successfully been downloaded, what we can do is start extracting it. So I'll right click it and click extract all. I want to extract. And what we want to do is not double click this executable. Instead, we want to open up a PowerShell window. And we might need administrator privileges, so why don't we go ahead and open up a PowerShell with admin privs. So we go in the bottom left corner, click on the Windows button, type in PowerShell. From here, you can click on Run as Administrator, or you can right click and Run as Administrator. Click Yes. And now we want to make sure that we're in the same directory as the extracted Sysmon. So in this case, the directory is C:\user in the user's download folder, essentially. So we want to double click that, copy it via right click copy, or you can do what I did, and which is Control C. Then all we gotta do is jump over to the PowerShell prompt, type in cd for change directory. And just for good practice, you can put it in a quote. Paste that in by right clicking, then quote again. So now we should be in the correct directory. So what we want to do is also make sure that our Sysmon configuration is in the same directory as well. So in this case, we can either copy it or we can cut it. I'll just drag and drop it into that folder, to be honest. Double click it, make sure that it's there, and indeed it is there. Beautiful. You might have noticed that there's various executables for Sysmon. We want to focus on the Sysmon 64, simply because this is a 64-bit machine. So all we gotta do is just type in Sysmon 64, and then hit tab. That should auto-complete for you. And if you hit enter, nothing will happen. It will just show you the help menu. And essentially, it'll just tell you how to install it and update the configurations and all that other good stuff. And to double check if we have or have not installed Sysmon, we can do this in a couple ways. So first and foremost, we can go in the bottom left corner, click on the start menu and type in services. Hit enter. This should pop up the services that are installed onto your computer. And then what you want to type in is, or actually what you want to click and type is S. And then you want to look for Sysmon. If there's no Sysmon installed, then you will not see Sysmon. So in this case, I can confirm that I do not have Sysmon installed. The second way we can do it is go through event logs. We can do this by typing event viewer, hit enter there. This will show you all of the logs associated with this machine. So what you want to do is click on applications service logs, open that up. And then you want to expand Microsoft. From there, expand Windows. And now we want to look for Sysmon. So if I scroll all the way down, is there going to be any Sysmon? And no, it doesn't seem that Sysmon is installed. So what we want to do now is type in Sysmon again, 64, tab. Now that auto completes. And now we want to install the configuration by using the tac-i command. Right here, install service and driver. Optionally, take a configuration file. So we'll press space and type in Sysmon. And then we can tab until we find it, or we can just type in Sysmon config, since we know that we named it that way. Hit tab and it'll autocomplete. From there, we can hit enter, and this will pop up, which is essentially your license and agreement. You can hit agree, and then it should go ahead and run its course and install Sysmon. So to double check to make sure that Sysmon is installed, we can run through those steps that I've shown previously. First, we go through the services. We don't have to close and reopen it. We can easily just refresh it. Once I click refresh, you can see that there's Sysmon 64 exists here. Same goes for the Windows event viewer. What we can do is click on action, click refresh. And unless I'm a liar, there should be Sysmon somewhere here. All right, so I guess I am a liar. We have to close event viewer and reopen it. So again, click the Windows button, type in event viewer or event. And then from there, click on applications and service logs and expand Microsoft, Windows, scroll all the way down and see if you have Sysmon. In this case, we do. Beautiful. So that is how you install Sysmon and get that up and running. We can click on operational, and this will give you a bunch of telemetry about your system and help you catch evil. Now that we have our Windows 10 client machine installed along with Sysmon, let's start setting up Wazuh next. I'll be using DigitalOcean as my cloud provider. If you wanted to follow along, you can sign up using the link provided down below. That will provide you with $200 credit for the first 60 days, but you must provide a valid credit card. This is extremely helpful for those that have an M1, M2, or M3 Max. To begin, I'm going to be building our Wazuh server first. So we can create that by clicking on the top right corner under Create. Now with DigitalOcean, droplets are virtual machines. So I'll click on Droplet. And from here, you want to select the region that you're currently residing in. In my case, I'll just select Toronto, scroll down, and we want to select Ubuntu and the version 22.04. As for the droplet type, we can go ahead and select basic. However, we do want to make sure that the specs have at least 8 gigs of RAM and 50 gigs hard drive space. So we can go with the option of $48 a month. Now again, with the $200 credit, this doesn't really seem too much. So this is what I'm going to be choosing: the basic plan, premium Intel, and the $48 a month. Scroll down. We want to create a password or an SSH key, whichever suits you. But for me, I'm just going to create a password. Do make sure that you use a password manager because we will expose this to the internet eventually, but not in the beginning. Once you put in your password, scroll down, you'll see an option to change your host name. I'll change this to Wazuh, scroll down, and then hit create droplet at the bottom. While we wait for this droplet to be created, I highly recommend you start setting up a firewall. Otherwise, you'll get spammed from external scanners. We can create a firewall by heading over to networking at the left-hand side, and then firewalls tab, click on create firewall. Now by default, we have SSH open to the public. I'm going to name this as firewall. I mean, you can name it as whatever you want, but I'm going to name it as firewall. And I am going to select all TCP. I'll remove all IPs and only add my public IP. Now to get your public IP, open up a new tab and go into what is my IP address. And then you can select the first link, and then you should see your public IP address. Copy that out and then paste it into your sources. Now you want to do the same for UDP as well, just in case. Once that's done, scroll all the way down and click on Create Firewall. Once your firewall has been created, we can start adding our virtual machine onto this firewall. Now, the reason why we're doing this, if you don't create rules, by default, SSH is open to the public. So anybody or any scanners out there will hit your box and try to break in. But because we specified our public IP, our virtual machine is only accessible through us. Let's head over to our virtual machines by selecting droplets on the left-hand side. And here we can see the public IP of our Wazuh server. Let's click on Wazuh. And from there, we want to select networking. Scroll down until you see firewalls. Click on edit. And then you want to select your firewall that you just created. From your firewall, click on droplets and select add droplets. Look for your virtual machine. My case was Wazuh. I'll select Wazuh and click on add droplet. Now the firewall will be protecting our virtual machine. There are a couple of ways that you can access your virtual machine. Firstly, you can use something like PuTTY to use SSH, or from the droplets tab under Wazuh, you can click on the access tab and then select launch droplet console. Once we have successfully SSH'd into our virtual machine, we can begin performing some updates and upgrades. Now, because by default we're under root, we can perform this by typing in apt-get update and apt-get upgrade. You will eventually get presented with this screen. We can just hit enter. And finally, it'll ask you which services should be restarted. Again, we can just hit enter. Once it's been finished updating and upgrading, we can start with the installer of Wazuh. To get started with Wazuh, we can run a curl command that is also found on their website. but I'll leave it here as well as in the description down below if you wanted to just copy that. After a couple of minutes, Wazuh should be finished installing. Now there is one thing to keep in mind, and that is the username and password. You want to make sure that you copy the username admin as well as your password, because you will need it to log in to your Wazuh dashboard. So let's go and do that right now. To log into Wazuh, do take note of your public IP of the server. In this case, my public IP for Wazuh is 159.203.17.39. I'll go ahead and copy this. And then open up a new tab, and in your browser, make sure you type in HTTPS and then paste in the IP. Now we can click on Advanced, Proceed, and we're presented with Wazuh's dashboard. We can put in our admin user and paste in the password. And now we're in. Perfect. Awesome. We have our client machine and Wazuh up and running. The next is to install TheHive. Similar to Wazuh, we'll be using Ubuntu 22.04. To begin, select Create at the top right corner and select Droplet. You want to choose the region that's closest to you. I'll select Toronto. Scroll down, we'll use 22.04. As for the specs, I'll go with the 8 gigs similar to Wazuh. Scroll all the way down. You can use either an SSH key or a password. I'll be using a password. Scroll down until you see the host name. I'll change this to TheHive. And then I'll select Create Droplet. You want to make sure that TheHive is placed in the firewall that you created earlier. To do that, we can click on TheHive, go into Networking, scroll down to Firewalls, click on your firewall, go to Droplet, and then Add Droplet. Now we want to type in our host name, which is TheHive, and click on Add Droplet. Perfect. Now both Wazuh and TheHive is being protected by our firewall, and it can only be accessible by us and nobody else. I've opened up a new tab and SSH'd into TheHive. Now we can start installing some prerequisites. Again, this can be found in their documentation, and I will also leave it in the description so you can just easily copy and paste. With TheHive, we must install 4 components. The first one is Java, second is Cassandra, third is Elasticsearch, and fourth is TheHive itself. Once we've finished installing the prerequisites, we can start installing Java. Whenever you are presented with this screen, you can go ahead and hit enter. Once Java had finished installing, the next one is Cassandra. Then we can install Elasticsearch. And finally, we can install TheHive. This whole process for installing TheHive and Wazuh takes about 10 to 15 minutes, but once it's finished installing, the next step is to configure it. Now that we have installed our virtual machines, Wazuh and TheHive, we must configure these to get them to work across the board. And we will do this in the next episode. That is it for the video, and if you had some problems setting these up, please let me know in the comment section down below and I'll try my best to help you out.